All these years, I've been too stubborn, I've been blind, but now I see that I've been missing out on some of the best video games of our time. Thank you, Hidetaka Miyazaki. You are a true artist. What is going on, everybody? It's Alec from Carolina Vice Video, and today we are going to be talking about 2022's Game of the Year, Elden Ring. Now, Elden Ring was developed by From Software, and From Software has been deemed by so many gamers that it is the savior of the industry because of its intense difficulty. But their games have a lot more to offer than just that. Hidetaka Miyazaki, the president of From Software, states that he wants his gamers to know what it feels like to overcome something that's really difficult and getting the satisfaction of success. And after completing Elden Ring, I can safely say Miyazaki knows what he's talking about. Elden Ring is a challenging game, and its story is not as straightforward as most high fantasy stories are. Most of the story and the lore are going to be found in the items in their description, or in the land itself. So it's pretty important to stop and smell the roses every now and then when you're playing the game. Now, most of From Software's games get a mature rating, so this is your warning. A lot of the creatures and characters in this game look like there's something out of a Sauron, Mordor fever dream. Elden Ring is also rich with a lot of philosophical views, so try not to get too offended by the events that unfold. Also, this video will definitely contain spoilers from Elden Ring, so if you haven't beat that game, I highly suggest you go in and do that right now, and then come back. Also, feel free to use the chapters at your leisure, and guys, if I mispronounce something in the game, cause I'm gonna, just don't hammer me too bad in the comments, I'd appreciate that. But now, let's talk about Elden Ring. Before our journey begins, it's important to know about the deities that inhabit the lands in between, and the war called the Shattering. The great deity, known as the Greater Will, chose a queen to rule the lands in between, and bestowed upon her the Elden Ring, making her a lesser god in the process. The queen's name was Marika, who would reside amidst the Erd Tree. The Greater Will and the Erd Tree had a code, the Golden Order. All who were blessed and served the Herb Tree lived by this code, and it was the Queen's job to enforce it. Queen Marika, or Marika the Eternal, would go on to have 8 offspring demigods with her consorts or husbands, the first and second Elden Lords. The first Elden Lord, Hoarah, was a warmonger with magnificent strength. Once he married Queen Marika, he changed his name to Godfrey in order to be perceived more as a noble. Marika and Godfrey would have 3 of the demigod children. However, as time passed, Godfrey would be exiled and became the first Tarnished, one who no longer received the blessing of the Golden Order. The second Elden Lord, Radagon, already had 3 children with a woman, a queen of a smaller land in the lands in between, named Rennala. Once Radagon left Rennala for Marika, his children were made into demigods. Radagon and Marika would have 2 children, Miquella and Melania, who for some reason both suffered a curse. As time passed, Marika's first son that she had with Godfrey, Godwin the Golden, would be assassinated, and this event would be known as the Night of Black Knives. This would cause Queen Marika to go against the deity the Greater Will, and shattered the Elden Ring, creating shards called runes. The demigod children all sought out a rune for themselves. The runes made them drunk with power, and waged war upon each other, known as the Shattering. However, in this war, there would be no victors, just a stalemate. And this is where you come in, a tarnished of no renown. Queen Marika's whereabouts are unknown, and the blessing of the Greater Will now calls you back. Elden Ring offers a lot of classes to start from, and if I had to divvy them up into groups, I would say that you are either going to be gravitating toward being a mage or a melee user. When you first start out, your class doesn't really affect you so much, but it will down the line. So it may be a good idea to do some research on what builds you're wanting to get into so you're off to a good start. Now, I had no idea how weapons scaled with your attributes in Elden Ring or the other Soulsborne games, so I was blindingly just boosting stats. Yeah, don't do that. And when it comes to customizing your avatar, this game is one of the most impressive customizations I have seen. You can really fine-tune your character to the micro details. But no need to fret about your appearance. You'll be able to change your cosmetics at the main game's hub at your leisure, all except your gender.
Did you ever think that maybe there's more to life than being really ridiculously good looking?
Your character starts out in the area called the Chapel of Anticipation and throws this human spiderling at you.
You're the spiderling, crime-fighting spider. You're Spider Boy?
So you can get wrecked by it and wake up in the Cave of Knowledge.
Don't worry, Torrent. Fortune is on his side.
Are you sure about that, lady? This area acts as a tutorial for players so they can get the basics of the game. And as a first-timer with these types of games, it was a lot to learn. I mean, I didn't even utilize sprint for the longest time. This section also teaches you about grace, little safe checkpoints that your character can warp back to. Now's a good time to note the risk-reward system that these games have. Once you die in the game, you lose all of your experience that you just earned by defeating enemies. Players will have the chance to be able to go back and pick up their experience, which are called runes, so it definitely makes you think about your choices in the game. When you get into Limgrave, the whole world is open for you.
Yes, tarnished are we? Come to the lands between for the Elden Ring,
But like legends who play this game, you pick a fight with this guy, and die. When looking at the awe-inspiring landscape of Limgrave, it can be intimidating for the player to figure out what they should do next. But thanks to the incomplete map that you have, you can see these suspicious looking rays of grace, creating a guide of where you need to go next. And I would say that it's important to follow this until you meet Melina and you go to the Round Table Hold. This way, players can level up by using the minor runes they're getting from slaying enemies.
Shall I turn your runes to strength? Let my hand rest upon you. For but a moment, share them with me.
And unlock Torrent for traversing the craggy and hilly landscapes. Fighting foes on horseback is a great way to begin leveling up your character. But once players make it to Stormhill Shack, I would actually recommend backtracking to the Weeping Peninsula. This area is great for finding monsters and dungeons that low-level players can get through and at the same time get better weapons and equipment. Another place I highly advise going to is the War Master Shack east of Stormhill Shack, where you can learn and purchase Ashes of War, stylish and effective attacks that can help you put down the baddies. And right by it is a great rune farming area, and I'm sure most Soulsborne players know the importance of grinding in these games. If you can successfully take down these 5 trolls, you will get 5,000 runes, which is a pretty handsome amount when you first start playing. And once you defeat them all, you can go back to the Site of Grace and do it all over again. I shit you not, I probably got over 300,000 runes from this area alone to level up. I mean, that wasn't all at once. Sometimes I would just make myself go here when I was done playing and run a couple rounds and level up. And the same thing when I would first start a session. After you get a little experience under your belt, it's time to tackle your first demigod, held deep inside of Stormveil Castle. But before you can even get in there, you have to face Margit the Fell Omen.
In search of the Elden Ring, emboldened by the flame of ambition.
Now this guy's just a bitch. 30% of players can't even beat this guy and they just give up on the game. That's a pretty crazy statistic. They also give you a cooperator to make it a little bit easier. But if you've never played a Dark Souls game, then you are in for it. In retrospect, this dungeon felt so much more difficult than some others down the line. Maybe it's the eerie, dark aspect to it. I mean, seriously, when you first get in here, this is the first guy you see, Gostok, and he's just a mega creep.
Come over here, would you?
Heck, there's even videos online about how this guy is like apparently stalking you in the castle, and if that doesn't make your skin crawl, I don't know what will. But eeriness aside, they really don't pull any punches when it comes to difficulty at this dungeon. Most players will be forced to go the long way through this dungeon by having to traverse the outside, instead of going through the front gate and surviving that barrage. When you come across enemies, more than likely, you're going to be outnumbered. And if you're not outnumbered, they'll just overpower you. It's just a good old-fashioned hazing with this place. The dungeon itself is huge, and it's not always clear where you need to go next, which is why it's so important to read the messages other players have left. Most of the time, these messages will give you an idea of where you need to go next, but there is the occasional liar amongst the crew, but normally somebody calls them out. These messages is such a great mechanic to help bolster the community for this game. Once you finally get through the dungeon and you're at the boss fight, you're going to go against Godric the Golden. Now this bastard takes his enemies that he's defeated and grafts their body parts onto his body. Like, what the heck, man? Now, I really wish that I could tell you that you're going to go in there and kick his ass. But it's probably not going to go down that way. You're probably going to get defeated by Godric a couple times. So hey, go back to that rune farm place, level up some more, and come back and take his ass down. Once you've defeated Godric,
And one day, we'll return together to our home.
and ascend the divine tower of Limgrave, restore power to the great rune, go back to the Round Table Hold and let them know that you are the real deal, the game really opens up to you. You can have counsel with the two fingers, which are believed to communicate directly with the greater will. I'll never forget when I first saw these things and I thought they were so freaky. Like, how could we be the good guys if these are our mascot? Now, the other NPCs in the Round Table Hold take you a little bit more seriously, especially Sir Gideon Ofnir, but we'll get more into him later. And you only need one more shard of the Elden Ring in order to become Elden Lord.
Ring, seek another of its kind to become Elden Lord and restore the Golden Order.
Let the words of the fingers guide you.
Once you beat Godric and get yourself a great rune, you should really take your time and explore and talk to everyone you can. If you get tunnel vision just doing the main mission, you are going to miss a lot of things. And this game is too damn beautiful and complex to do that. Talking to most characters you meet along your path will more than likely trigger some kind of side quest, which reinforces you to explore all of these regions in the lands in between.
Rena, how could this be? My daughter deserved better. The fault lies with me. I chose duty over my daughter's safety. And that is how fate has answered.
I'll find them. The foul wretch is responsible for this. I'll hunt them down and exterminate every last one of them.
It's been a really long time since I've played a game that felt so lived in and alive. Like coming across a caravan of troops transporting goods, finding a prisoner held up in a basement. If you've played Skyrim, then you know how immersive these little details can be to players. Now, all the nobles and soldiers you come across want to kill you. You are still tarnished after all, which is like being excommunicated by the government or church. So they attack you on sight. But if you take a good look at these nobles, they almost look like zombies. In fact, it's mainly the tarnished or the finger maidens that don't look like this, with a few exceptions. It makes you wonder in the game, is it really such a good thing to receive the blessing of the Golden Order? Now I know players will never forget stumbling into a little place called Nokron, or the Siofra Well. This dazzling cosmic cave is probably one of the coolest places I have ever seen in video games. And with this game's graphics, it's a real experience to witness it with 4K and high dynamic range. My first thought was, wow, they perfected the aesthetic of the vaults from Phoenix Rising. And it's not just this area that fills you with awe. Limgrave and Liurnia look like they're right out of a fairy tale. And when you wander into Caelid your first time, you think you just waltzed into an in-game area. But no, this hellscape is available to you from the very get-go. But ye be warned, there's a lot of strong enemies and difficult dungeons that await you in this area, thanks to what is literally plaguing the lands, the Scarlet Rot. The Scarlet Rot gives this area its iconic look. Now, I love when video games utilize color palettes. Seriously, I probably talk about it in all of my videos. Atlas Plateau looks like it's in eternal autumn, but if you travel near Mount Gelmir, the area looks barren and ruined. The volcano itself is decadent with crimson, matching the philosophy of those who reside in the manor. Power takes all. Rhea Lucaria's cerulean sky creates a sense of wonder and reflects the Academy's magic users. Valkyrian Manor adds a blanket of haze and washes out most of the colors to white to show the Carian family's affinity for the moon. I mean, I could go on all day about how beautiful the land is itself in this game. It really helps counter all the creepy shit you find. The game creates a perfect ebb of flow of facing your fears in the depths of dungeons and beholding the magnificence of the terrain. The dungeons in Elden Ring I think are some of the best in the genre. Now, I like The Legend of Zelda, but when I'm doing puzzles or something more than I'm fighting enemies, it makes me sad. But Elden Ring's dungeons feel more natural, like you are infiltrating a castle stocked with people and creatures who want to jump out at you and make you shit your pants, then kill you. You progressing through them feels natural, like, how do I get to the other side of this castle? Well, you have to feel and fight your way. The level design complements players' intuition to trust that they are going the right direction. But all of Elden Ring's dungeons are stocked with items, gear, and maybe even some NPCs that will open up a side quest. So even if you aren't exactly progressing toward the boss, the developers made it where you're not wasting your time. I love how the developers really utilize the architecture to the extent that they did. You get to scale spires, rooftops, get a good view of everything that really makes you appreciate all the little details that are in this game. There's also several secret passages and mini bosses to find. Now, the developers didn't have to make really cool platforming sections. Okay, this could have been like any other dungeon crawling place where you just fight from one corridor to another, but no, they decided to go the extra mile and put in great level design that requires a little bit of skill from the player to do some platforming. Normally, once you find the path to the boss, there's a shortcut that opens up to you, or even a site of grace that you can directly fast travel to. Now, it's always good to face your enemies and get extra runes, but sometimes, when you're in the depths of dungeons, your best option is to Catacombs and caves really up the eeriness to their design, sometimes making you traverse the dark and pick up a lantern to light your way, or navigate through the maze-like chasms. These areas also won't let you warp out, which adds to the intensity. You just have to fight your way and solve some problems until you find your way to the boss, which makes dying a bitch in these areas, which leads us to our next chapter.
Heed my words. I am Melania, Blade of Nicola. And I have never known defeat.
The combat in Elden Ring is one of the core aspects to Miyazaki's games. Brutal, intense engagements with some of the most intimidating and gargantuan of foes. The aesthetic of these enemies and bosses in this game are not as grotesque as in Dark Souls, but still pack a hell of a punch. In fact, Miyazaki iterated that he wanted Elden Ring to feel more mythical than his previous installments. This is not only evident in the land, but the character and enemy design as well, especially with the bosses. Primordial serpents, lunar goddesses, lords of the underworld, heroes with Herculean strength, dragons, gods of the forest, gods of the stars. So many different cultures were used to fill up this world, but these powerful beings have the mechanics to match their aesthetic. The way these creatures and warriors move is so fluid and at times graceful, like you can feel every hit you take from the enemy. It's clear that the developers really took their time studying the different animals and fighting techniques. Like, look at this. This looks like an actual snake I'm fighting. The acrobatics and finesse can be just as overwhelming as fighting an enemy 10 times your size. Unless you're fighting Malekith, who is 10 times your size and is jumping around like he's in the Matrix. You just can't help to admire the movement. Like, okay, if I die to you 3 more times like that, I'm not going to be upset. The bell-bearing hunter that spawns in at night at the War Master's shack freaked me out on my first encounter.
A Sith Lord?
Tall, clad in black, throwing around a crimson blade. Talk about being invadered. Which brings me to my next point with bosses. Dungeons aren't the only place where you're going to encounter them, but you encounter them in the field too. I mean, they'll just show up while you're on the loot. Think you're safe talking to a merchant? Hell no, not in this part of town. Investigating this suspicious looking windmill town and poop, there it is. And don't even get me started on the Godskin Apostles. These freaky dudes are so fucking annoying. Like, I just want to punch them in the face. All freaking 11 of them. You can only imagine my reaction when running into both of them at Fair Missoula. These guys were so difficult, I didn't even survive my victory. Seriously. I died, but a split second later, my Mimic Tier had landed the final blow to finish them off. And I had respawned at the last Site of Grace, and sure enough, these guys were gone. Duo bosses are so intense. Thank God we can summon in this game, or else I'd still be playing it stuck on these guys. A common thing advertised about Miyazaki's titles is that, well, they're hard. And I wouldn't say that it's a misconception or anything, but the key to the combat in these games is not to spam buttons and to try to remain in control. Enemies' attacks can be blocked, parried, dodged, and you can even break their stance to land a powerful strike. It's the moment that you get frantic is when you get punished. The reason why people say, oh, the Souls games are hard is because they simply require time and patience to fight these bosses. Now, I'm not trying to downplay anything here. My first run at Elden Ring, I pretty much had to rely on leveling up my character in order to best my opponent, okay? Sue me. This is my first Soulsborne game, so I simply lack the combat experience to take these guys on like a Giga Chad.
No, you are God! Don't let him kill me!
Let your flesh be consumed by the scarlet rot.
Dungeons and bosses are going to test your perseverance and how strong your will is, especially the latter. There's gonna be times where you are yelling at the screen because an enemy that looked like had no health killed you. You're going to have to study your opponent's movements and prepare for the fight. Learning what element type to use against an enemy or boss can give you the edge you need. At Carrion Manor, the Moonveil Katana isn't the best weapon because the enemies there have a high resistance to magic weapons. For most games that I'm playing, I try not to look up too many things or watch any walkthroughs because I feel like that takes away from the experience and the fun of the game. But if you do find yourself stuck on a dungeon or a boss, it may be time to do some research on what item or weapon is appropriate. Because when you're using the wrong weapon, you will just think that the game is against you. And what hasn't been said about Melania? I had to get Rivers of Blood to defeat her. Now, there are some questionable hitboxes that are really difficult to avoid. Believe it or not, I kept dying to Rickard in both phases dozens of times. In snake form, he will stick his head in the ground and shatter the floor beneath you, and you have to book it to evade that attack or else it will one-shot you. Radagon had a couple similar attacks to avoid as well, but I'm sure there was something I wasn't getting. He was a part of the last boss fight, so it does make sense that he was a brutal adversary. But gosh, don't get me started on the actual last boss. The Elden Beast. The Elden Beast is a spectacle, no doubt. This celestial looking Pokemon will taunt you, and as soon as you get close to him, he'll just swim away. Or fly away, like he's a damn Navy SEAL. The best method of taking him down is to be aggressive. You gotta stay after him despite how evasive he can be. This aspect alone made my expectations for the final boss fall a little bit short. It was just too much running. If I could trade his mobility for like 50% more of his health, I honestly would. Once you get used to the combat in this game, I gotta say, it's hard to find anything else that really compares. I feel like I've been spoiled by this game's brutal yet addicting fights. Among challenging boss fights, there's a spectrum of colorful characters in Elden Ring. And, well, some of them are bosses. Each one harbors a particular story or theme that helps shapes the player's experience. Loyalty and companionship.
So now, we stand against the demigod once known as the strongest of them all. The way ahead is pleasingly simple. We fight, sword and fang.
Hopelessness and despair.
They laid hands upon my servant Lanya, and I refused to let the insult stand. The tale of House Hoslow is told in blood. I haven't achieved anything at all thus far. Even though I've dirtied my hands time and time again, I'm still yet to achieve anything. Perhaps I am a fool after all.
Bravery and naivety.
If you intend to challenge Godric,
I ask you call upon me. As fellow Tarnished, we must each follow our own guidance, down whatever road takes us to the throne of Elden Lord.
Arrogance and pride.
I am Selvis, preceptor in the sorcerous arts. I don't know what it is the mistress sees in a provincial tarnished like you. Well, you took me at my word. Did you not realize I was merely being polite? Oh, you provincials never cease to amaze.
The NPCs in Elden Ring show lots of emotions at once, creating complex interactions, just like in real life. In Raya Lucaria, when you encounter Renala in a boss fight, she is in a state of fleeting anger and lingering despair. Like I stated in the beginning of the video, Radagon, her former husband, left her to be with Queen Marika, leaving her in this pitiful state. Once you defeat her in battle, she doesn't even try to attack you again because of how broken she is. Starscourge Radahn displays honor of being a warrior. Radahn was once considered the strongest of the demigods. During the War of the Shattering, in his battle with Melania, he lost his wits and became a feral barbarian, with his last wish to be brought down on the battlefield, hence the festival at his keep in Caelid. Melania shows hope that one day her brother Mikola will return to her at the foot of his hailing tree. Little does she know, Mikola was actually kidnapped by Mohg, who now goes by the Lord of Blood, but more on him in a second. But perhaps one of the biggest themes in the game is that of ostracism. You and all the other Tarnished were turned away, banished from the lands in between, and the blessing of the Golden Order. The twins of the first Elden Lord in Marika, Morgott and Mohg, are born omens, meaning they had physical attributes that were considered cursed, and for most of their life, they were imprisoned underground for their physical appearance. Morgott rose above the judgment and defended the kingdom when the Golden Order had no ruling regent.
Willful traitors, all have it writ upon thy meager grave. Felled by King Morgott, last of all kings.
However, the other did not. Mohg found a new god to serve, one that rivals the Greater Will. But there are several outer gods like the Greater Will that inhabit this universe. There are several other omens in the lands between that you will encounter, but none quite like Morgott and Mohg. Betrayal is right around the corner for everybody in this game.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
After all, the guy who wrote Game of Thrones was a part of this. Sir Gideon Ofnir,
They all know him!
is considered the leader of the Round Table Hold and is reluctant to give you any praise.
Allow me a word of advice. As your senior, you are a mere visitor to the Round Table, nothing more.
Unless you literally tell him everything he wants to know. So much for being the all-knowing, and then he will reward you. But towards the end of our quest, it is none other than Gideon who stands in our way to get to the foot of the Erd Tree.
I knew you'd come to stand before the Elden Ring, to become Elden Lord. What a sad state of affairs. I commend your spirit, but alas, none shall take the throne. Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle unto eternity. In bones, a tarnished cannot become a lord. Not even you.
One of the most mysterious characters in Elden Ring is Marika herself. Queen Marika is not a god. Her power was given to her by the Greater Will. When she became the vessel for the Elden Ring, she was given a shadow. This shadow came in the form of a beast who would serve and protect her. Before the events of the Shattering, in the early days of her reign, she took a piece out of the Elden Ring, and that piece was death. Also known as Destined, death and gave it to her shadow, Malekith. Malekith would be the one who could deal out true death to anything in the lands in between. After her tribulations with being the Elden Ring's vessel, like having to banish the first Elden Lord, losing her firstborn, she began to wonder why people praised the Golden Order like they did, and that's when she began to conspire against the greater will. Not everything in Elden Ring is as it seems. Most of Miyazaki's games require you to formulate your own thoughts of the game, either by doing research like looking up the lore, or just taking it at face value. Now, we're not going to dive too deep into the lore here, but there are some that believe the Erd Tree and the Greater Will are actually a parasitic entity. A long time ago, there used to be another great tree that was here in the lands in between, but it was overran by the Erd Tree. At the end of the day, America is subjugated to the Greater Will, the Golden Order, and the Erd Tree. Remember how I said there were more outer gods? Well, there's one that an ancient race of fire giants praised. These giants held a sacred fire, the Flame of Ruin, that could burn mostly through anything. And the only thing that can compromise the Erd Tree's hold over the land is the Flame of Ruin and destined death. After that big revelation, let's rewind a little bit. The first time we gather enough runes to enter the capital, we are unable to proceed inside of the Erd Tree to claim the title of Elden Lord, because the thorns from the Erd Tree won't allow anybody to pass. And it's here where our mysterious gal pal, Melina, tells us that in order to pass through the Erd Tree, we must seek the Flame of Ruin to start the kindling of the Erd Tree. If you're expecting this to be your average fantasy game where you restore the previous order of things, I'm sorry, but you picked up the wrong title. After galloping to the summit of the mountaintops where the Flame of Ruin resides, and defeat the last of the fire giants, and depending what ending you want, this is where things could diverge for you in the game. But for now, we'll go with the ending that I unlocked in my playthrough. Melina sacrifices herself to the flame so she can ignite the first sparks of the Erd Tree. But it is you who must finish the job by claiming the Rune of Death from Malekith and Farum Azula. Then you march to the now Ashen capital, face off against the first Elden Lord.
Alas, I am returned. The first Elden Lord. Tarnished. Thy strength befits a crown.
And enter the blazing Erd Tree. Queen Marika is shackled to her rune by the Greater Will. And if you didn't know before, you're about to know now that Radagon is Marika. Now, just how Radagon came to be isn't very clear, and in case you haven't noticed by now, hardly anything in this game is straightforward, and a lot is left up to speculation. I won't go too far into my theory, but I think the Greater Will created Radagon as a part of Marika, so there would always be a part of her that is obedient. Once we beat down Radagon, the Elden Beast is released. The Elden Beast was sent here a long time ago by the Greater Will, and would become the Elden Ring. Once you defeat the Elden Beast, The greater will's influence over the lands in between has been severed for the time being, and it's here where our character has a choice. Which age will we bring next? The age that I brought on was the Age of the Stars. Along my journey, I met a demigod, Ronnie,
The battle is over, I see.
who cast aside all of her affiliations with the Golden Order. The Golden Order had been perverted, manipulated by several figures in the game, and Ronnie wishes to put an end to it and bring forth the Age of the Stars.
Now cometh the Age of the Stars. A 1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon.
For those who don't know, Ronnie's speech was mistranslated in a few sections of the game when they were converting it from Japanese to English. And it's a shame because it almost paints Ronnie as a villain in the English translation, but she actually was written to be more heroic. Ronnie sacrifices and overcomes a lot in order to enact this new age, and doesn't wish to be praised as any god or queen, but she's doing simply what she believes is best for the people in the lands in between. No more tarnished, no more ostracism. At least that's what I gathered from it.
Let us go together. My dear consort eternal.
The thought is a rather moving gesture. What we got in English made it sound like she was going to engulf the world in darkness. So yeah, they fumbled that translation pretty bad. There's so much to do in Elden Ring. I haven't even scratched the surface on what you are capable of doing in From Software's latest title. What I can tell you right now is, I'll be watching out for what they put out next. Till next time, guys, y'all be good. Peace.